Okay, I think I'm recording here. So, here is a very quick lesson on defensive driving in a parking lot. Now, I used to do this lesson with students on their first drive, but it can take a while to do. I think it's a good lesson. It kind of introduces students to the how to process information, analyze risk, and it's basically in a parking lot here. So let's go ahead and start off. I'm in a parking spot and I'm going to be backing out. So when you back out of a parking spot, you have to acknowledge, well, where are people coming from? First part of defensive driving, where are people coming from? So you could say, well, they're coming on the left, the right, maybe in back of me. Okay. Then you need to say, well, of those three areas, which one is the biggest risk? And let's say you're backing up to the right. So you could say, well, I'm backing up to the right, so probably on the right. You could say, well, what about in back of me? Well, you got a rear view mirror. You can take a couple glances. You know, that's a lot of times not a huge issue what's in back of you. What you're more concerned about is somebody coming down the lane quickly. Now, when you back out to the right, if possible, you should back out very, very tight so you don't back into another lane. So you could say, well, what about people coming on the left? Yes, that is a concern, but if you back out really tight, now I know sometimes you can't, but if you back out really tight, then the person coming on the left, a lot of times not going to be that huge of an issue, okay? Probably the person, because when you're backing up to the right, you're going into that lane, that right lane. Now let's say there's a large vehicle next to you, and let's say, so you can't see. So you've identified where people are coming from, you're backing out to the right, and you see there's a large vehicle on my right. I cannot see around that vehicle. So if you think about the collision and it's not fun, you'd think, okay, if I back out, guy coming down the lane, and he could nail me. So that's when I would ask, okay, so you can't see the guy coming. What can you do to prevent the collision? What can you do to maybe help him see you earlier, see you sooner? And that's when a lot of students would say, well, back out really slow. Excellent. Backing up really slow could give him time to see you, and maybe time to see him. Probably not, though, especially if it's a large vehicle. But yeah, backing out slow. Remember, collisions are an equation. If there's a guy coming down the lane fast and you back up fast, your speed plus his speed plus a visibility issue equals a collision. You want to remove yourself from the collision equation. So if you're saying, you know what, somebody could be coming fast, then you have to say, okay, but if I do something fast, then that can greatly increase the chance of a collision. Because remember, collisions are an equation. We're trying to remove ourselves from the equation by doing something proactively so that we don't have to slam on the brakes or swerve or anything. We want to be proactive in our defensive driving, not reactive. So backing up slowly is good. You're kind of removing yourself from the equation. Then I would say, what else could you do as you back up to the right? Now, this is where most students get really stumped. In fact, this is where most drivers would be stumped. Some students say, honk the horn. Okay, you could. I don't think it's going to do much good. I mean, if the guy's 50 to 100 feet away, his windows are up, his air conditioning's on, chances are he's not going to hear any horn honking. But, you know, maybe you could, and maybe that could help a bicyclist, you know. So I'm not saying you can't honk your horn. I'm just saying that, you know, it may not have the effect that you think it does. But there's also something else you can do that is extremely simple to get that guy's attention, to make him look at you. And this is where people are still stumped. And then I say, remember, you're backing up to the right. And that's usually when students say, right turn signal? Yep, put on your right turn signal. But then a lot of people might say, well, Wes, you're not required to put on a signal. Yeah, so in a lot of states, you are required to put on a signal when you back up. In a lot of countries, you are required to put on a signal. It just so happens that you're in Idaho, and Idaho has some of the worst driving laws in the nation, probably some of the worst driving laws in the world. I mean, we were one of the last states to make texting and driving illegal. So you can't always say, well, there's no law that's requiring me to do that. If you want to be an advanced driver, you have to think beyond the law. You have to say, well, what is a safe thing for me to do? And you have to get over some of these roadblocks or speed bumps or whatever you want to call them. For example, you might not want to put on a signal when you back up because nobody does it. But in a way, that's kind of a good thing for you, because if you're putting on a signal when you back up and somebody's coming and nobody does that, then that could really get the person's attention. The person could really be like, whoa, I see a turn signal on this car that's backing up. That's weird. Is that legal? Am I supposed to do that? I don't know if I'm supposed to do that. So in a way, if you put on a turn signal when you're legally not required to, and nobody else does it, that actually might help in your advantage. Now, I really do hope that everybody puts on a turn signal when they back up. Now, so yeah, you put on a signal and you back up, nobody does it. Even friends or family members could say, what are you doing? You don't need to put on a turn signal when you back up. It's not necessary. You don't need to. You know what? By the time you debate it, you think about it, you question it, you could have just put on the turn signal. You could have just put it on. Okay? It's amazing how many times I think a lot of people think about, do they need a signal? Is it required? Should they put it on? It's like by the time you even spend 1 second thinking about it, you could have put the turn signal on. And remember, the turn signal is simply a flashing light. It gets people to look at you. Everybody on the road is distracted. You want people to look at you. That flashing light is your best friend out there on the road. So it makes perfectly good sense, but students need to know, drivers need to be aware of these objections, these speed bumps. You know, nobody does it, not required by law, friends and family might think you're weird. Who cares? Who cares? As a safe driver, you need to think beyond the law, beyond what people do, and start thinking differently about driving, approaching it differently, thinking outside the box. And so for me, when I drive, I really do feel like a weirdo sometimes, like I'm driving just so different. But then I realize, no, I'm driving smart. I'm driving clever. I'm driving much safer than the average driver. So yeah, turn signals when you back out. Now, this is when I would ask students, well, what if there's no car on the right? What if there's no car on the right? Is it still a good idea to put on a right turn signal when you back up? Even though you can clearly see down the lane, nobody's coming, is it still a good idea? And students usually say, yeah. And I say, well, why would you put it on? I mean, if you can clearly see down the lane and there's nobody coming, sounds like that's a lot of good reasons to just not use the turn signal when you back up. So why do you think you'd still want to do it? And students say, well, for one, there could be somebody coming. There could be somebody coming. Exactly. For one, there could be somebody. Because if you're simply looking for cars, you could miss that little scooter guy. And as we all know, these little scooters, electric gas-powered scooters, they go through in parking lots at 30, 40 miles per hour. I saw a guy standing on an electric scooter in traffic on Maple Grove, tailgating a truck at 40 miles per hour. Little tires, about, 12-inch tires, going 40 miles per hour on an electric scooter down Maple Grove. And they are everywhere. So yeah, you put on a signal, even though you might say, well, there's no car coming down the lane. Well, there could be somebody somewhere. Okay, so there's always that. You could still miss somebody. The other thing that some students say is it keeps a good habit alive. And that is one of the biggest things in driving to understand, is a lot of times you're not gonna feel the need to do something. Like, I don't think I need to look over my shoulder. I don't think I need a signal. I don't think I need to do this. I don't think I need to do that. That's where a lot of people get into trouble, is they start overanalyzing and they think of ways to not do something. Well, I don't feel like I need to do this. It feels pretty safe. No, a lot of times, build habits, keep those habits. Okay? So yeah, if anything, you're keeping a good habit alive. You're using a turn signal when you're not legally required to. And if you're using turn signals all over the place in a parking lot when you're legally not required to, you're probably going to use them when you are legally required to. And the last lesson is basically, are you going to see the benefit of the signal? Possibly not. So let's say there's a big vehicle on your right, you're backing up to the right, you put on a right signal. As you back up, you then realize, hey, there's a guy, he's actually stopped, he's waiting for me to back out, he's being nice, he's waiting for me. Are you going to know for sure that that turn signal got that guy's attention and he slowed down and he came to a stop? Are you going to know that it was the turn signal? No, you'll never know. It's not like the guy's going to say, hey, thanks a lot for putting on the signal. I was about ready to ram your car and I saw the turn signal. No, you'll never know. A lot of defensive driving, you'll never really know if the effect of it. And again, we live in a society where we like to get rewards and recognitions and pat on the backs. Good job, you did this, therefore congratulations. But in defensive driving, a lot of times you'll never know. You'll absolutely never know whether or not what you did actually prevented a collision. It's just like if they put up a new stop sign on a new street. If they put in a brand new street in a neighborhood and put in a brand new stop sign, will they ever know that that stop sign prevented deaths and collisions? They'll never know. But it's a good idea to use it. Same thing with a seatbelt. You can get in a collision and easily survive without a seatbelt. Okay, but here's the thing: why not just put on a seatbelt? Why not just put it on? You know, why? There's no point in testing this. Why not? Why not just put up the stop sign? Okay, why not just put on your turn signal when you back up? You may not know if that ever helps, but it's a good idea to do it, and it's extremely easy. It reinforces a good habit. So there's another lesson in defensive driving, is just keeping in mind that you're not going to feel the direct benefit of whatever it is that you're doing a lot of times. Now, sometimes you might. Sometimes you might. Just a month ago, we did a left turn, and we had far right lane position. There was two left turn lanes at Meridian and Overland, two left turn lanes, and we were in the far right lane position in the outside lane, and thank goodness, because somebody came around and came within 6 inches of our car. If we were not in the far right, and it didn't feel like it was necessary. Again, a lot of times you don't feel like it's necessary. Well, I can do this and get into this lane position, use this turn, but I don't feel like I need to. No, just do it. Because yes, a month ago, it was very thankful we were in the far right lane position, even though it felt like we didn't need to be, because there was nobody in that other lane. There was nobody in that other lane. But within seconds, a guy took the inside left turn lane at probably 40 to 50 miles per hour. His tires squealed, came within 6 inches of our car. Thank goodness we were in the right lane position, even though it didn't feel like it was necessary, because a few seconds earlier, there was nobody in that lane. So again, people can come from out of nowhere. You can make a mistake, reinforcing good habits. You just have to get over these ideas that you're not legally required to. Nobody does it. So anyways, just to recap, the defensive driving technique is basically, where are people coming from? What is the biggest potential problem? What is the type of collision? What might you do? Slamming on your brakes, whatever. Okay, I might slam on my brakes, I might swerve. Okay, sometimes those might be good options, but here's the thing: I don't want to do those options. I don't want to back out around a spot. A guy's coming, he slams on his brakes, I slam on my brakes when I'm backing out. I don't want to do that. I don't want him to slam on his brakes to avoid hitting me, and I don't want me to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting him. Again, remove yourself from the collision equation. So thinking, well, I could swerve, I could brake, that's good, that is defensive driving. But real defensive driving is saying, you know what, if there's a guy coming fast down this lane, I don't want him to slam on his brakes. I want him to see me early. But what can I do? Well, I can back out slowly, I can put on a right turn signal. Okay, there you go. Thinking outside the box. Now, that's just simply backing up. Now, that technique applies everywhere. Scanning, where are people coming from? Where's the biggest potential problem? What is the type of collision? What might you do to avoid the collision at the last second? And then the final step is, well, what can we do proactively so that we don't even have to do something aggressively like a swerve or brake? What can we do proactively? So anyways, it's kind of a long lesson. Like I said, it's 15 minutes, and I used to do it on the first drive in the parking lot, but it just took a lot. And again, it's just introducing students to analyzing risk, thinking of prioritizing what could happen, and then thinking outside the box about how can I prevent it. And it's a very good little lesson. It just took a long time, so I'm taking it out. So anyways, if this isn't like how to back out of a parking spot perfectly and safely, there's a lot more to this lesson. This is universal technique here that applies everywhere. Where people are coming from, prioritizing risk, what's the type of collision, what might I do to prevent the collision at the last second, swerve, whatever. Okay, and then you go one step further and say, now what can I do to prevent any of that from happening? So in reality, real defensive driving is boring. Nothing happens. That's how you'll know that if you're a real defensive driver, you won't feel aggression, you won't get all upset, you won't get stressed out, you won't get tickets, you won't get collisions, you won't die. None of these things will happen to you if you are a real defensive driver. A lot of people drive and they swerve, they brake, swerve, brake, and they say, whoa, I'm a wonderful driver, I'm a defensive driver, and that guy did that, and I swerved, and I did this, and I did that. And that's when I would come in and say, you know what, you probably didn't need to do any of those things. Okay? It's like, say you're going into, there's a possible fist fight. Let's say there's an altercation, possible fist fight. And somebody could say, well, if the guy punches you, he throws a punch, and you want to block or do something, to avoid the punch, block the punch, whatever, you don't want to evade or block or something like that. Okay, you know what? It's good to know those things, defensive things in any situation. Defensive driving, it's good to know what you can and cannot do. But in reality, it's like, well, how about we not get into a fight in the first place? How about we avoid? See what we can do to avoid, so I don't have to do any defensive maneuvers, whether in a boxing match or driving or whatever. Okay, again, we want to keep things simple, and we want to keep it low stress. Swerving, braking, doing all this aggressive stuff, a lot of people think that is great driving. They're on top of things, they're avoiding all these collisions by swerving and braking. No, in my opinion, that's just reactive defensive driving. It's not bad, but with real defensive driving, thinking about how to prevent it in the first place, that is real defensive driving. Boring driving. Anyways, I'll keep going on and on, so let's just call it good. Thanks for sticking with me, and I'll see you out there on the road. Thanks.